The warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the human transport ship Frontier. Captain Jake Sullivan looked up from his coffee cup as the alarm stopped ringing. His second officer, Lieutenant Dan Carter, was already at the communications panel. "Captain, we have 3 Zephyrian ships approaching. They are asking permission to board for inspection," Dan said. Jake put down his cup and walked to the main screen. 3 sleek alien vessels moved toward them like silver sharks in the darkness of space. Each ship was twice the size of the Frontier and covered in weapons that could turn his transport into space dust in seconds. "Send them permission to board," Jake said, "and call Lieutenant Kate Morrison to the main deck. We need our best diplomatic officer for this." Dan nodded and pressed several buttons on his panel. "Lieutenant Morrison, please report to the main deck. We have visitors." Kate Morrison was in the ship's small gym when the call came through the speakers. She was hitting a heavy bag with quick, sharp punches. Sweat ran down her face as she stopped and grabbed a towel. At 28 years old, Kate was one of the youngest officers on the ship, but she had more experience dealing with aliens than most people twice her age. She quickly changed into her clean uniform and checked herself in the mirror. Her brown hair was pulled back tight, and her blue eyes looked calm and ready. Kate had learned long ago that looking professional was half the battle when dealing with alien species who thought humans were wild and dangerous. The main deck was busy when Kate arrived. Crew members were checking equipment and making sure everything looked perfect. They all knew that Zephyrian inspections were never really about checking cargo. The tall blue aliens were looking for any excuse to cause problems for human ships. "Lieutenant Morrison reporting for duty, Captain," Kate said as she walked up to Jake. Jake turned to face her.
"Kate, I need you to handle the inspection team. Keep things calm and professional. These Zephyrians have been getting more aggressive lately, and I don't want any problems." "Understood, sir. What cargo are we carrying that might interest them?" "Medical.
Supplies for the colony on Kepler 442b. Nothing unusual, but you know how they feel about human expansion into that sector." Kate nodded. The Zephyrians had been complaining about human colonies for months. They claimed humans were too violent and unpredictable to be trusted with settling new worlds. Every inspection was really a chance for them to slow down or stop human supply ships. The docking bay doors opened with a loud hiss. 3 Zephyrian officers walked through the airlock. They were all tall, nearly 8 feet high, with blue skin that looked like polished metal. Each alien had 4 arms that moved in ways that made humans feel uncomfortable. Their leader wore a uniform covered in medals and symbols that showed his high rank. Captain Sullivan stepped forward. "Welcome aboard the Frontier. I am Captain Jake Sullivan. This is Lieutenant Kate Morrison, who will assist with your inspection." The lead Zephyrian looked down at both humans with violet eyes that seemed to glow in the ship's lights. "I am Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Defense Force. We are here to inspect your cargo and ensure you are following all galactic transportation laws." His voice was deep and had an accent that made some words sound strange. Kate noticed that he spoke louder than necessary, like he was trying to show his authority. "Of course, Commander. Lieutenant Morrison has all our documentation ready for your review," Jake said. Kate stepped forward and handed Commander Vexatar a data pad with all their shipping papers. "Everything is in order, Commander. We are carrying medical supplies to the Kepler colony. All items are properly declared and documented." Commander Vextar took the data pad with one of his 4 hands. His other hands remained at his sides, but Kate noticed they were positioned near the energy weapon on his belt. The other 2 Zephyrian officers spread out to examine different parts of the main deck. "Medical supplies," Commander Vextar said, slowly. "Humans always claim they are bringing medical supplies. Tell me, Lieutenant, what kind of medical supplies does a human colony really need?" Kate kept her voice calm and professional. "Standard emergency medical equipment, antibiotics, surgical tools, and basic diagnostic machines. The colony has been requesting these supplies for 3 months. 3 months is a long time to wait for medical supplies. Perhaps your people are not as good at planning as they claim to be." Jake started to step forward, but Kate gave him a small look that made him stop. She had dealt with this kind of attitude before. Some aliens like to make small insults to see if humans would get angry and prove their point about human aggression. Colony supply runs are scheduled based on ship availability and cargo space, Commander. We do our best to meet all requests as quickly as possible, Kate said. Commander Vextar walked around the main deck looking at everything with his strange violet eyes. He picked up tools and equipment without asking permission. One of his officers was examining the food storage area, opening containers and checking their contents. Your ship is old, Commander Vextar said. Humans use old ships to carry important supplies. This does not seem very professional. The frontier has passed all safety inspections and is fully certified for interstellar transport, Kate replied. Age does not determine a ship's ability to complete its mission safely. The alien commander stopped walking and turned to face Kate directly. She was tall for a human woman, nearly 6 feet, but she still had to look up to meet his eyes. Commander. Vextar seemed to enjoy the fact that he towered over her. You speak very confidently for such a young officer, he said. How many years have you been in space, Lieutenant? 8 years, Commander. I have completed over 200 successful missions with various alien species. 200 missions, Commander Vextar repeated. And yet you look so young. Tell me, what qualifications do humans require for diplomatic officers? Kate could feel the rest of the crew watching the conversation. She knew that Commander Vexatar was testing her, trying to find a way to make her look foolish or unprepared. This was part of the game that some aliens played with human crews. I have completed advanced training in xenobiology, interstellar, law, and diplomatic protocols. I also have experience in crisis management and conflict resolution, Kate said. Crisis management, the alien commander said, with what might have been a smile. That is interesting. What kind of crises do humans typically face in space? Equipment failures, navigation problems, medical emergencies, and occasionally misunderstandings with other species, Kate replied. Commander Vextar walked over to the cargo manifest display and began reading through the list of medical supplies. His violet eyes moved quickly as he scanned each item. Kate stood nearby, ready to answer any questions about their cargo. These antibiotics, Commander Vextar said, pointing at the screen. They are very powerful. Why would a small colony need such strong medicine? The colony is located on a planet with several unknown bacterial species. Strong antibiotics are necessary to treat potential infections until the colonists can build up natural immunity. Or perhaps these antibiotics could be used to develop biological weapons. The accusation hung in the air like a dangerous gas. Every crew member on the main deck stopped what they were doing and looked at Commander Vextar. Jake took a step forward, his face showing anger for the first time during the inspection. Kate raised her hand slightly to stop her captain from speaking. She kept her voice level and professional. Commander, I can provide you with the complete medical records and colony health reports that justify each item in our cargo. These supplies are desperately needed by sick colonists, not for any military purpose. Commander Vexitar stared at Kate for several long seconds. The tension on the bridge was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, he turned back to the cargo manifest and continued reading. The inspection continued for another hour. Commander Vextar and his officers checked every corner of the ship, opened every container they could find, and asked detailed questions about items that were clearly harmless. Kate answered every question with patience and professionalism, even when the aliens made insulting comments about human competence and honesty. But Kate Morrison was not just any lieutenant. Before joining the Space Corps, she had been a championship fighter and had served with Special Forces on Mars. More importantly, she was the daughter of one of the most powerful military officers in human space. None of the Zephyrians knew this, and Kate preferred to keep it that way. The inspection was finally coming to an end when Commander Vexitar made the mistake that would change everything. Commander Vextar had finished looking at the cargo manifest for the third time. Kate Morrison stood beside him, waiting patiently as he searched for problems that did not exist. The other crew members on the main deck continued their work, but everyone was watching the alien commander from the corner of their eyes. The Zephyrian had been on their ship for over an hour now. He had checked every box, questioned every item, and made insulting comments about human organization and competence. Kate had answered every question with perfect professionalism, never showing anger or frustration, even when Commander Vextar suggested that humans were too stupid to properly label their medical supplies. Captain Jake Sullivan watched from his command chair as the inspection dragged on. He had seen many alien inspections over his 15 years in space, but this one felt different. Commander Vextar seemed to be looking for a fight, not just doing his job. The alien's violet eyes kept moving back to Kate, as if he was studying her for signs of weakness. Chief Engineer Ryan Parker was working at a control panel near the back of the main deck. He had served with Kate Morrison on 2 previous missions and knew her better than most of the crew. Ryan had watched her handle difficult situations with aliens before, and he had never seen her lose her calm. But he also knew things about Kate's background that most people did not know. "Lieutenant Morrison," Commander Vextar said suddenly, "you have been very cooperative during this inspection." "Thank you, Commander. We want to make sure everything goes smoothly," Kate replied. "Yes, very smooth. Too smooth, perhaps. In my experience, humans are not usually so controlled." Kate kept her expression neutral. "I believe in following proper procedures, Commander. It makes things easier for everyone." Commander Vextar turned away from the cargo display and faced Kate directly. His forearms moved in a way that looked casual, but Kate noticed that his hands were positioned like he was getting ready for some kind of action. She had seen similar body language from hostile aliens before. "Tell me, Lieutenant, what would happen if I found something wrong with your cargo? Something that violated galactic transportation laws? Then we would work together to fix the problem, Commander. We have no interest in breaking any laws. And if the problem could not be fixed? If your cargo had to be confiscated?" Kate paused for just a moment before answering. The question was clearly a trap, designed to make her say something that could be used against them later. "Then we would follow whatever legal procedures are required, Commander. Even if it meant your colonists would not receive their medical supplies? Even if people might die without these medicines?" Now Kate understood what Commander Vextar was trying to do. He wanted her to get emotional, to say something about putting human lives above galactic law. Then he could claim that humans were dangerous rule breakers who put their own species above everyone else. "The legal procedures exist for good reasons, Commander. We trust that any decisions would be made fairly, and with consideration for all parties involved." Commander Vextar's violet eyes narrowed. He had been trying to make Kate lose her professional composure for over an hour, and she had not given him even a small opening. Every answer was perfect. Every response was exactly what a good diplomatic officer should say. "You are very well trained, Lieutenant Morrison," he said. "Thank you, Commander." "Perhaps too well trained. Sometimes I wonder if humans practice their answers before these inspections, like actors practicing for a play." Lieutenant Dan Carter, who was working at the communications panel, looked up when he heard this comment. Several other crew members also stopped what they were doing. Commander Vextar was now directly insulting Kate's honesty and professionalism. Kate's voice remained completely calm. "I assure you, Commander, all of my responses are genuine. I have no need to practice answers because we have nothing to hide." "Nothing to hide," Commander Vextar repeated slowly. "That is exactly what someone with something to hide would say." Captain Sullivan started to stand up from his command chair, but Kate caught his eye and gave a tiny shake of her head. She could handle this situation without help from her captain. Getting other crew members involved would only make things worse. Commander Vextar began walking in a circle around Kate. It was a classic intimidation technique that some alien species used to make humans feel trapped and nervous. Kate stood perfectly still, turning her head slightly to keep the alien commander in her sight without appearing defensive. "I have inspected many human ships, Lieutenant Morrison. Most of your officers show fear when I question them closely. They get nervous, start sweating, speak too quickly, but you do not show these signs." "I see no reason to be nervous, Commander. We have done nothing wrong. Or perhaps you are just very good at hiding your emotions. Humans are known for being deceptive." The insult was clear and direct. Commander Vextar was no longer pretending to be professional. He was deliberately trying to provoke Kate into an angry response that would justify whatever action he was planning to take. Kate took a slow, quiet breath before responding. I prefer to think of it as being professional, Commander. Commander. Vextar stopped walking and stood directly in front of Kate. His height advantage was obvious, and he seemed to be using it to try to make her feel small and powerless. His forearms hung at his sides, but his hands were clenched into fists. Professional, he said. Yes, humans always talk about being professional. But I think you are just afraid. I am not afraid, Commander. No? Then perhaps you are simply weak. Human females are known to be weak. The comment about human females being weak was the worst insult yet. Every person on the main deck heard it clearly. Captain Sullivan's face turned red with anger, and several crew members looked like they wanted to say something, but Kate remained calm. I disagree with that assessment, Commander, she said quietly. Of course you disagree. Weak creatures always deny their weakness. Commander Vextar took a step closer to Kate. Now he was standing close enough that she could smell the strange metallic scent that came from his blue skin. His violet eyes stared down at her with obvious contempt. Perhaps you need a demonstration of what real strength looks like, he said. What happened next took only 2 seconds, but it changed everything. Without any warning, Commander Vextar raised one of his massive hands and placed it against Kate's shoulder. Then he pushed her backward with enough force to make her stumble. Kate managed to keep her balance and did not fall, but everyone on the main deck saw the deliberate assault. The bridge became completely silent. The only sound was the quiet hum of the ship's engines and the soft beep of computer systems. Every crew member stared at Commander Vextar with shock and anger. Kate straightened her uniform jacket and returned to attention. She did not say anything. She did not show anger or fear. She simply stood there looking professional and calm as if nothing had happened. Clumsy humans, Commander Vextar said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. Perhaps you should learn to stand properly before venturing into space. Captain Sullivan jumped up from his command chair and started walking toward the alien commander. His hands were clenched into fists and his face showed the kind of anger that could start a war between species. Kate saw her captain approaching and knew she had to stop him before he did something that would make the situation much worse. She caught Jake's eyes and shook her head again, more firmly this time. Captain Sullivan stopped walking, but his whole body was tense with barely controlled rage. Is there anything else you need to inspect, Commander? Kate asked. Her voice was still perfectly calm and professional. Commander Vextar seemed surprised that Kate had not reacted with anger to being pushed. He had expected her to lose her temper, which would have given him an excuse to arrest her for assaulting a galactic inspector. Instead, she was treating the incident like it had never happened. Perhaps there is, he said. I think I need to examine your personal quarters, Lieutenant Morrison. There might be contraband hidden there. It was an obvious lie. Personal quarters were not normally inspected unless there was specific evidence of wrongdoing. Commander Vextar was just looking for another way to humiliate Kate and provoke a reaction from the human crew. Of course, Commander. My quarters are available for inspection whenever you are ready. But Kate Morrison was not just any lieutenant. The crew members who knew her background were watching carefully as she maintained her professional composure. They could see small changes in her posture and the way she held her hands. Chief Engineer Ryan Parker quietly reached for his communication device. What none of the Zephyrians realized was that Kate had just made a decision. She was not going to lose her temper or break discipline. Instead, she was going to use a different kind of strength that Commander Vextar did not know humans possessed. She was going to make a phone call. Kate walked calmly to the communications panel, her movements smooth and controlled. Lieutenant Dan Carter stepped aside to give her access to the system. Commander Vextar watched her with curiosity, wondering what she was planning to do. Kate entered a code sequence into the communication system. It was a very specific code that only a few people in the entire galaxy knew existed. The 12 ships appeared on the Frontier's sensors like ghosts materializing from empty space. Lieutenant Dan Carter stared at his display screen and counted them twice to make sure he was seeing correctly. Each ship was much larger than the Frontier, and their weapon signatures showed they were built for war, not transport. Captain Sullivan, Dan said, his voice tight with excitement. We have 12 military vessels approaching our position. They just dropped out of hyperspace. Captain Jake Sullivan moved quickly to the sensor station and looked at the readings himself. The ships were arranged in a perfect military formation, with a massive dreadnought in the center surrounded by smaller but still deadly warships. Their approach was controlled and professional, like a well-trained fleet responding to an emergency. Commander Vextar abandoned the toolkit he had been examining and rushed to look at the main display screen. His violet eyes went wide when he saw the size and number of the approaching human ships. The 3 Zephyrian vessels that had seemed so powerful an hour ago now looked like toys compared to this fleet. "What is the meaning of this?" "Commander," Vextar demanded, "why are human warships approaching this location?" Kate Morrison remained at the communications panel, her fingers moving over the controls with practiced skill. She looked calm and professional, as if having 12 warships appear was a normal part of her day. "I sent a priority message, Commander," she said simply. "Standard procedure when there is an incident during an inspection." "Incident? What incident?" "I was conducting a routine inspection of your cargo." Kate turned to face the alien commander. For the first time since the inspection began, she was smiling. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of slim that made intelligent people realize they had made a serious mistake. "You physically assaulted a human officer during a diplomatic inspection, Commander Vextar. That constitutes an incident under both human military law and galactic diplomatic protocols." The color drained from Commander Vextar's blue face. His forearms began to shake slightly as he realized what he had done. Pushing Kate had seemed like a small thing at the time, just a way to show human weakness and maybe provoke a reaction that would justify more aggressive action. Now it was starting to look like the biggest mistake of his career. The largest ship in the approaching fleet was close enough now that its details were visible on the main screen. It was a human dreadnought, one of the most powerful types of warship in the galaxy. Its hull was covered in weapons that could destroy entire space stations, and its sensor arrays were strong enough to track individual people on planets. "Incoming transmission from the lead vessel," Lieutenant Dan Carter announced. "They are requesting to speak with the Frontier." "Put them through," Captain Sullivan ordered. The main screen changed from the sensor display to show the bridge of the approaching dreadnought. A woman in a military uniform appeared on the screen. She had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and steel-colored eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. Her uniform was covered in medals and rank insignia that marked her as one of the highest-ranking officers in human space. "This is Admiral Lisa Morrison aboard the Dreadnought New York," the woman said. Her voice was crisp and professional, with the kind of authority that came from decades of commanding respect from both humans and aliens. "We received a priority alert from the Frontier. Please report your status immediately." Commander Vextar stared at the screen with growing horror. Morrison was not a common human name, but it was not unusual either. However, the family resemblance between the Admiral and Lieutenant Kate Morrison was obvious to anyone who looked closely. They had the same blue eyes, the same facial structure, and the same way of holding themselves that suggested complete confidence in their abilities. Kate stepped forward to the communications panel. "Admiral Morrison, this is Lieutenant Kate Morrison reporting. We have experienced an incident during routine inspection that requires diplomatic intervention." "Explain the nature of the incident, Lieutenant." Kate's voice remained calm and professional. "Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Defense Force physically assaulted me during his inspection of our cargo. The assault was unprovoked and occurred in front of multiple witnesses." Admiral Morrison's steel-gray eyes seemed to grow even colder. "I see. And what was the nature of this assault?" Commander Vextar placed his hand on my shoulder and pushed me backward with significant force. He then made derogatory comments about human clumsiness and suggested that humans should not be allowed in space. The Admiral's expression did not change, but something in her eyes suggested that Commander Vextar was in very serious trouble. She looked past Kate to focus on the alien commander, who was now standing very still and trying to look as small as possible despite his 8-foot height. "Commander Vextar," Admiral Morrison said, "do you dispute Lieutenant Morrison's account of what happened during your inspection?" Commander Vextar's forearms trembled as he realized that lying to one of the most powerful humans in the galaxy was probably not a good idea. Admiral Morrison, there may have been a misunderstanding. I was simply trying to move past the lieutenant, and perhaps I used more force than necessary. I see. So you admit to making physical contact with my daughter? During a diplomatic inspection. The word daughter hung in the air like a nuclear explosion. Every person on the Frontier's bridge suddenly understood why 12 human warships had appeared so quickly. Commander Vexistar had not just assaulted a random human officer, he had assaulted the daughter of Admiral Lisa Morrison, one of the architects of humanity's first contact protocols and the commander of the entire human defense fleet. Captain Sullivan felt his knees go weak. He had known Kate Morrison was a skilled officer, but he had never known about her family connections. Looking back, it explained a lot about her confidence and her ability to handle difficult alien encounters. Commander Vextar's two subordinates began backing away from their leader. They could see that their commander had just made the kind of mistake that could end careers and start wars. The Zephyrian government had been trying to avoid conflict with humanity for years, and Commander Vexitar had just given the humans a perfect excuse to take aggressive action. Admiral Morrison, Commander Vextar said, his voice now much quieter and more respectful, I apologize if my actions were inappropriate. It was not my intention to cause a diplomatic incident. Your intentions are irrelevant, Commander. Your actions speak for themselves. You physically assaulted a human officer during a peaceful inspection, and you did so in front of multiple witnesses. This constitutes a clear violation of the Galactic Peace Accords. The other ships in Admiral Morrison's fleet had now taken positions around the frontier and the three Zephyrian vessels. They were not pointing their weapons at anyone yet, but their message was clear. The humans were ready for whatever happened next. Chief Engineer Ryan Parker watched the scene unfold with fascination. He had served with Kate Morrison before and had suspected that she came from an important military family, but he had never imagined that her mother was Admiral Lisa Morrison. It explained why Kate was so calm under pressure, and why she always seemed to know exactly what to do in difficult situations. Commander Vextar, Admiral Morrison continued, I am going to contact the Zephyrian High Command directly to discuss this incident. I suggest you use the time before that conversation to think very carefully about how you want to explain your actions to your superiors. Commander Vextar's violet eyes darted around the bridge of the frontier, looking for some way out of the situation he had created. His subordinates were now standing as far away from him as possible, clearly hoping that Admiral Morrison would not hold them responsible for their commander's actions. Admiral Morrison, perhaps we can resolve this matter quietly, Commander, Vextar said. There is no need to involve our governments in what was essentially a minor misunderstanding. A minor misunderstanding? Admiral Morrison's voice carried a dangerous edge. Commander, you assaulted the daughter of a human admiral during a diplomatic inspection. In what universe would that be considered minor? Kate Morrison watched the conversation with professional interest. She had activated the priority alert system, knowing exactly what would happen next. Her mother was not someone who took threats to her family lightly, and the Admiral had the military resources to back up her displeasure. Captain Sullivan, Admiral Morrison said, shifting her attention to the Frontier's commanding officer. Please prepare a complete report of this incident, including all sensor recordings and witness statements. I want documentation of everything that happened during this inspection. Yes, Admiral. We have complete recordings of the entire inspection process. Excellent. Commander Vextar, you and your officers will remain aboard the Frontier until I have spoken with your government. Any attempt to leave will be considered an act of aggression against the human defense fleet. The three Zephyrian officers were now effectively prisoners aboard the human ship. Their own vessels were surrounded by human warships, and any attempt to rescue them would result in a battle they could not possibly win. Lieutenant Dan Carter was recording everything that happened for the official report. Admiral Lisa Morrison sat in her command chair aboard the Dreadnought New York and reviewed the sensor recordings from the Frontier. She had watched the entire inspection 3 times now, paying careful attention to every word and action. What she saw made her angrier than she had been in years. The recording showed her daughter Kate maintaining perfect professionalism, while Commander Vexistar became increasingly hostile and insulting. Then came the moment when the alien commander deliberately pushed Kate backward. The assault was clear and unprovoked, witnessed by an entire bridge crew. "Communications officer," Admiral Morrison said, "open a direct channel to the Zephyrian High Command on their homeworld. Priority diplomatic frequency." "Yes, Admiral. Channel opening now." Admiral Morrison had been dealing with alien governments for over 20 years. She knew that the Zephyrian High Command would be very unhappy to receive an emergency communication from the human defense fleet. They would be even more unhappy when they learned what one of their commanders had done. The main screen on the New York's bridge showed the blue-tinted communication chamber of the Zephyrian government. 3 high-ranking officials appeared on the screen, their forearms moving nervously as they recognized Admiral Morrison's uniform and rank insignia. "Admiral Morrison," the center official said. "This is High Commander Zalthek of the Zephyrian Defense Council. We were not expecting a direct communication from the human defense fleet." "High Commander Zalthek, I am contacting you regarding a serious incident involving one of your officers. Commander Vextar has committed assault against a human diplomatic officer during a routine inspection." The 3 Zephyrian officials looked at each other with obvious concern. They knew that any incident between their species and humanity could have serious consequences for their government's carefully maintained neutrality in galactic politics. "Admiral Morrison, can you provide us with details of this alleged incident?" "It is not alleged, High Commander. I have complete sensor recordings of Commander Vextar physically assaulting Lieutenant Kate Morrison aboard the transport ship Frontier. The assault was unprovoked and occurred during what should have been a routine cargo inspection." Admiral Morrison transmitted the recordings to the Zephyrian High Command. She watched their faces as they viewed the evidence. Their violet eyes widened with shock, and their blue skin became even paler as they realized the seriousness of what their commander had done. Meanwhile, aboard the Frontier, Commander Vexitar was beginning to understand the full scope of his mistake. He stood in the center of the bridge while human crew members worked around him, no longer bothering to show him any respect or courtesy. His own 2 subordinates had moved as far away from him as possible. Captain Jake Sullivan was preparing the official incident report when his communications officer received a message from the New York. Admiral Morrison wanted to speak with Commander Vextar directly. "Commander Vextar," Captain Sullivan said, "Admiral Morrison wants to talk to you." The alien commander's forearms shook as he approached the communications panel. He knew that this conversation would determine his future, and possibly the future of relations between his species and humanity. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the screen, her steel-gray eyes fixed on Commander Vextar with the kind of look that could cut through metal. Behind her, the bridge of the New York was bustling with activity as her crew monitored the situation. "Commander Vexitar," Admiral Morrison said, "I have just finished speaking with your High Command. They are very interested in hearing your explanation for why you assaulted my daughter during a diplomatic inspection." "Admiral Morrison, I want to apologize for any misunderstanding that may have occurred during the inspection. I was simply trying to maintain proper authority during the examination of human cargo." "Misunderstanding?" Admiral Morrison's voice became dangerously quiet. "Commander, I have recordings that show you deliberately pushing Lieutenant Morrison after making insulting comments about human competence and suggesting that human females are weak. Explain to me how that constitutes maintaining proper authority, Commander." Vextar realized that lying or making excuses would only make his situation worse. The recordings clearly showed what had happened, and Admiral Morrison was not someone who would accept weak explanations. "Admiral Morrison, I made an error in judgment. The inspection had been going on for a long time, and I became frustrated with the thorough documentation your crew provided. I allowed my emotions to affect my professional behavior." "You allowed your emotions to affect your professional behavior," Admiral Morrison repeated slowly. "Commander, you are supposed to be a trained diplomatic officer. Your job is to conduct inspections professionally regardless of your personal feelings about the species you are dealing with." "Yes, Admiral. I understand that now." "Do you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you targeted my daughter specifically because she maintained her professionalism, while you became increasingly hostile. It looks like you assaulted her because she refused to give you an excuse to cause problems for a human supply mission." High Commander Zalthek's face appeared on a split screen beside Admiral Morrison. The Zephyrian official looked extremely unhappy as he joined the conversation. Admiral Morrison, the Zephyrian High Command wants to express our sincere apologies for Commander Vexistar's inappropriate behavior. His actions do not represent the official position of our government. High Commander, I appreciate your apology. However, this incident raises serious questions about the training and supervision of Zephyrian inspection teams. This is not the first time we have had problems with your officers showing hostility toward human crews. Commander Vextar watched the conversation between the two high-ranking officials and realized that his career was ending in real time. The Zephyrian High Command was clearly preparing to sacrifice him to maintain good relations with humanity. Admiral Morrison. Hi. Commander Zalthek continued. What would you consider appropriate action in response to this incident? I want Commander Vexitar removed from all inspection duties immediately. I want him formally disciplined according to Zephyrian military law. And I want a complete review of your inspection protocols to ensure this kind of incident does not happen again. Those terms are acceptable to the Zephyrian High Command. Commander Vextar felt his world collapsing around him. He was being dismissed from his position by his own government, without even being given a chance to defend himself. Years of military service were being thrown away because of a few minutes of poor judgment. There is one more thing, Admiral, Morrison said. I want Commander Vextar to personally apologize to Lieutenant Morrison for his assault, in front of his subordinates and the entire crew of the Frontier. Admiral Morrison, Commander Vextar said, I am willing to apologize for my actions. Good, because if you refuse, I will consider this matter unresolved and take further action through galactic diplomatic channels. Commander Vextar knew what that meant. Admiral Morrison had enough influence to make his life very difficult if he refused to cooperate. She could probably have him banned from traveling in human space, which would make it almost impossible for him to find work as a military officer. Kate Morrison had been watching the conversation from her position near the communications panel. She had remained professional throughout the entire incident, but she was satisfied to see that her mother was handling the situation with the kind of authority that made other species take humanity seriously. Lieutenant Morrison, Admiral Morrison, said, turning her attention to her daughter. Please step forward so that Commander Vexitar can deliver his apology. Kate moved to stand in front of the alien commander. Every crew member on the Frontier's bridge stopped what they were doing to watch. The two Zephyrian subordinates also moved closer, understanding that they were witnessing something important. Commander Vextar looked down at Kate Morrison, the human officer he had thought was weak and easily intimidated. She stood at attention with perfect military posture, her blue eyes calm and professional. He realized now that her composure during the inspection had not been fear or weakness. It had been confidence. Lieutenant Morrison, Commander Vextar, said, his voice much quieter than it had been during the inspection. I apologize for my inappropriate behavior during the inspection of your ship. I had no right to make physical contact with you, and I had no right to make insulting comments about your competence or your species. My actions were unprofessional and violated the diplomatic protocols that should govern interactions between our species. Kate Morrison listened to the apology with the same professional composure she had shown throughout the entire incident. When Commander Vextar finished speaking, she nodded once. I accept your apology, Commander Vextar. I hope this incident will help improve future interactions between human and Zephyrian crews. Admiral Morrison watched her daughter handle the apology with pride. Kate had maintained her professionalism from beginning to end, never losing her temper or giving anyone an excuse to claim that humans were too emotional or aggressive for diplomatic work. High Commander Zalthek, Admiral Morrison said, I expect a full report on the disciplinary action taken against Commander Vextar within 7 standard days. 6 months after the incident aboard the Frontier, the story had spread to every corner of human space and beyond. The recording of Commander Vextar pushing Lieutenant Kate Morrison during a routine inspection had been viewed millions of times on the Galactic Information Network. More importantly, the swift response of 12 human warships had sent a clear message to every alien species in the galaxy. Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of her new command, the destroyer Phoenix rising, and reviewed the morning reports from her crew. At 29 years old, she was now Commander Morrison, one of the youngest ship captains in the human defense fleet. Her promotion had come through 6 weeks after the Frontier incident, along with a new assignment to patrol the outer colonies. Commander Morrison, her first officer said as he approached her command chair. "We have an incoming transmission from Fleet Headquarters." Kate looked up to see Lieutenant Dan Carter, who had served as communications officer aboard the Frontier during the famous inspection. When Kate received her promotion and new command, she had specifically requested Dan as her first officer. She had also requested Chief Engineer Ryan Parker, who was now running the Phoenix Rising's engine room. "Put the transmission through, Lieutenant Carter." Admiral Lisa Morrison's face appeared on the main screen. Even though they were now both serving as ship commanders, Kate still felt a sense of pride whenever she saw her mother's uniform and the respect it commanded throughout the fleet. "Commander Morrison," Admiral Morrison said with a slight smile. "How is your new command treating you?" "Very well, Admiral. The Phoenix Rising is an excellent ship with an outstanding crew." "Good to hear. I have some interesting news for you about our friend Commander Vextar." Kate raised an eyebrow. She had heard rumors about what happened to the Zephyrian officer after his dismissal from the Defense Force, but no official reports had reached her. According to intelligence reports from Zephyrian space, Commander Vexitar has been assigned to work as a supply clerk on a remote mining station near the edge of their territory. Apparently, no other Zephyrian commander was willing to have him serve under their command. Kate nodded. She felt no satisfaction in hearing about Vextar's downfall, but she was pleased that the Zephyrian military had taken the incident seriously. "There's more," Admiral Morrison continued. "The Zephyrian High Command has implemented new training protocols for all inspection teams. They are calling it the Morrison Protocol, in honor of your professional handling of the situation." This news did make Kate smile. Having diplomatic training procedures named after her was an honor she had never expected when she joined the Space Corps 8 years ago. The Morrison Protocol requires all Zephyrian inspection officers to complete additional training in interspecies relations and conflict de-escalation. Physical contact with foreign officers is now strictly forbidden, except in cases of immediate safety threats. Kate's communications officer, Ensign Lisa White, looked up from her station. "Commander, we're receiving a priority message from the Colony Transport Endeavor. They're requesting assistance with an inspection issue." "What kind of inspection issue, Ensign?" "They have a Zephyrian inspection team aboard, and there seems to be some kind of disagreement about their cargo manifest." Kate and Admiral Morrison exchanged a look. Even 6 months after the Frontier incident, inspection problems with Zephyrian teams were still common. However, the nature of these problems had changed significantly. "Set course for the Endeavor's position," Kate ordered. "And Admiral, we may need to cut this conversation short." "Understood, Commander. Keep me informed of the situation." The Phoenix Rising changed course and moved toward the transport ship Endeavor. As they approached, Kate could see that the human transport was accompanied by 2 Zephyrian inspection vessels. The alien ships were maintaining a respectful distance, and their weapons were powered down. "Ensign White, open a channel to the Endeavor." The main screen changed to show the bridge of the transport ship. Captain Maria Santos appeared on the screen, looking frustrated but not particularly worried. "Commander Morrison, thank you for responding to our request. We have a Zephyrian inspection team aboard, and they seem to be having trouble understanding our cargo documentation." "What kind of cargo are you carrying, Captain Santos?" "Educational supplies for the new colony on Kepler 438b. Books, computer, equipment, scientific instruments, all properly documented and declared." Kate noticed that Captain Santos had emphasized the words "properly documented." This suggested that the Zephyrian inspectors were being unnecessarily difficult about paperwork. That was clearly in order. "Captain Santos, please put me in direct contact with the Zephyrian inspection leader." A few moments later, a Zephyrian officer appeared on the screen. He was smaller than Commander Vextar had been, and his manner was much more respectful. Kate could see that he was nervous about dealing with a human commander. "I am Subcommander Kelvax of the Zephyrian Inspection Service," the alien officer said. We are conducting a routine examination of this vessel's cargo. Sub-Commander Kelvax. I am Commander Kate Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. Captain Santos has indicated that you are having difficulties with their documentation. Can you explain the nature of the problem? Sub-Commander Kelvax's violet eyes widened slightly when he heard Kate's name. Every Zephyrian officer in the galaxy knew about the Morrison incident and the career-ending mistake that Commander Vextar had made. Commander Morrison, there is no significant problem with the documentation. We are simply being very thorough in our examination to ensure that all protocols are followed correctly. Kate understood what was really happening. The Zephyrian inspection teams had become extremely cautious about dealing with human ships, especially after the new training. Protocols were implemented. They were probably spending twice as long on each inspection to make sure they did not make any mistakes that could cause diplomatic incidents. Sub-Commander Kelvax, I appreciate your thoroughness. However, I want to make sure that your inspection is completed in a reasonable amount of time, so that Captain Santos can deliver her educational supplies to the colony as scheduled. Of course, Commander Morrison. We will complete our inspection within the next 30 minutes. Thank you, Sub-Commander. Please contact me directly if you encounter any problems that require clarification. The transmission ended, and Kate turned to her first officer. Lieutenant Carter, maintain position near the Endeavor until the inspection is complete. Yes, Commander. Kate returned to her command chair and thought about how much had changed in the 6 months since the Frontier incident. The story had become famous throughout human space, but it had also changed the way other species dealt with human crews. Some aliens had become more respectful, while others had become more cautious. Chief Engineer Ryan Parker's voice came through the ship's communication system. Commander Morrison, you might be interested to know that we just received a message from the Frontier. Captain Sullivan says hello and wants you to know that they haven't had a single problem with alien inspection since our incident. Apparently, most inspection teams now complete their work in half the usual time. Kate smiled. The Frontier incident had demonstrated something important about humanity that other species were still learning to understand. Humans were not the aggressive, unpredictable creatures that some aliens believed them to be. They were professional, organized, and loyal to each other in ways that could surprise their enemies and impress their allies. 20 minutes later, Sub-Commander Kelvax contacted the Phoenix Rising to report that the inspection of the Endeavor was complete. All cargo had been properly documented and the transport ship was cleared to continue to its destination. Kate watched as the Zephyrian inspection ships departed, their movements careful and respectful. The entire inspection had been completed, without a single harsh word or moment of tension. Lieutenant Carter set course for Patrol Sector 7. Our work here is done. As the Phoenix Rising moved away from the Endeavor, Kate received a message from her communications officer. Commander, we just received a priority transmission from Fleet Headquarters. Admiral Morrison wants to speak with you. Kate's mother appeared on the main screen again, this time with a broad smile on her face. Commander Morrison, I just received reports about your handling of the inspection situation with the Endeavor. Well done. Thank you, Admiral. The Zephyrian inspection team was very professional. Sub-Commander Kelvax seemed to understand the importance of completing his work efficiently. Kate, I want you to know that your handling of the original Frontier incident has had effects far beyond what you might realize. The story has been studied at the Fleet Academy as an example of how to maintain professionalism under pressure. More importantly, it has changed the way other species view humanity's role in galactic affairs. Kate felt a sense of pride in knowing that her actions had helped improve relations between humans and other species. The incident with Commander Vextar had been unpleasant, but the long-term results had been positive for everyone involved. Admiral, I have a question. Do you think Commander Vextar learned anything from what happened?